Hello everyone, this is Raji. In association with AKST, today let us learn about pivot transformation in data flow. So we can use the pivot transformation to create multiple columns from the unique row values of single column. Pivot is an aggregation transformation where you select group by columns and generate pivot columns using aggregate functions. So let us see this with an example, so we will have clear understanding. So let me open my storage account. So if we go to containers, in employee folder, I have a input folder. In input, I have employee details. Let me show you. So like this, we have employee ID, name, gender and department ID. So based on gender, let us create a column by using pivot, male column and female column with regarding this department ID. So if I show you with an example, you will have better understanding. So this is the column table we have. Let us open my data factory. Here create a new data flow. Name this data flow as pivot data flow. Now let me add source. Select Azure Blob Storage, continue. Delimited text, click continue. Employee, use first row as header. Linked services which we have created earlier. Browse the folder in employee in input folder. So it's loading. Let us wait. It is usually taking more time. Input. Click OK. Click OK. So we have created input data set. Now let us first see an aggregate function. So where we can use this aggregate function to have the details of department ID, gender, so let us take the aggregate function. Let us aggregate by department ID and gender. Click here plus icon. Select gender. Aggregate. We want total employees. Let us enter the expression nothing but count. Count. Department ID. Click save and finish. So if you view the preview, click on refresh. To view the data preview, we have to on this data flow debug mode. So if we see the data here, so for department ID, number of male employees are 1, number of female employees are 2. So like this, these details we can get using the aggregate function. Now we want this male in the male as the column name and female as the column name. So let us see how we get using pivot transformation. So delete this aggregate for now. Click search for pivot. In pivot, we have mainly these three inputs grouped by pivot key and pivoted columns. So in this group by, we have to select which columns to aggregate the pivot columns over. The output data will group all rows with the same group by the values into one row. The aggregation done in the pivot column will occur over each group. So let us group by department ID and pivot key. So the pivot key is the column whose row values get pivoted into new columns. By default, the pivot transformation creates a new column for each unique row value. So here we have to select gender. The unique values are female and male, F and M. And coming to pivoted columns, for each unique pivot key value that becomes a column, generate an aggregate row value for each group. You can create multiple columns per pivot key. Each column must contain at least one aggregate function. Here we want to count department ID. Save and finish. So let us see the data preview if we are getting the output as required or not. See, yes, we have the result based on department ID. In department ID 1, we have female 2 and male 1. In department ID 2, we have female 1 and male 3 employees. So we have the result. So let us give this output to the sink. Create new dataset. Azure Blob Storage. Click continue. Delimited text, continue. Select employee pivot output. Select the folder employee. OK. Directory select output. So this detail should be so we have created this one. So let us execute this using the pipeline. Create new pipeline. Data flow pipeline. select the data flow, pivot data flow. Now validate, close, just run by using debug. So it is running. So now what should happen is the output should be created in this folder, output folder. In this employee, see, output is created. So we have to select output to single folder. So I have forgotten that. Settings, output to single file, file name, out.csv. Now go to this pipeline. So we have to select that options, or else we will get many output files like this. So this is about pivot transformation in Azure Data Factory. Thank you.